with one or two running after it. And they were pointing out to the flight line. And so I decided to turn around on the pole to see what the ruckus was about. And I could not believe what I saw. There was this pie tin-like thing coming at me about 150 feet away. I thought it was remote controlled or something. 25 to 30 feet across, and I started down the pole as fast as I could go. I was up about 40 feet, and I threw my climbing rope out, gave it slack, and only touched the spike on each side of the pole 3 or 4 times on each side in before I got to the bottom. While I was running towards the big hangar, I looked back, and it had stopped and was just sitting there. Well, when we all got back to the shop and we had a good lap, one of the guys who saw me come down said he got down that pole faster than a fireman. So as you kids were growing up and we had the family gatherings, you used to ask to tell me about the time I became a fireman. You know, I always wondered why we did not use that thing during Vietnam and so forth. And over the years I realized if we had technology like that, it would have saved lots of lives. But I gradually realized that it had something to do with Ike being there that day. And it wasn't ours. It was an unwritten rule at Holloman. You didn't talk about what you saw, and after that day, it was seldom mentioned at the shop. I still have those climbers here someplace. Billy used to play with them. Remember? Mom here again. Well, Dad's wandered outside someplace. He said something about checking the pump. It's been sluggish lately. Dad thinks the motor's old and needs rewinding. He spends several hours a week up at Harold's helping out with mechanical and electrical stuff for farm equipment. Dr. Fornash says it's okay for Dad to drive a little around town, but to keep an eye on him. He thinks Dad has had a mini stroke or two, but should not do any highway driving at night. He drags his left foot a little, but gets out to the golf course in good weather. But he has to use a cart now. We're looking forward to seeing all you at Christmas. Say hi to Bob and Warren for us and hug the twins. All of our love. Mom and Dad.
Art and I got together over 3 years ago. Art's going to tell you how he got in contact with me. And there's another little vignette from somebody else that was at Holloman. Here's Art.
First, I want to tell you about the lady from Nehami County, I believe, southern Nebraska. She's sad. This is the second time she wrote the letter. She read the letter. First time she broke down in the middle of it. Her father died in 2 months after the letter was written. She's the last letter. And she said, I got to make myself over and be back down in a couple minutes. She came down wearing a wig. She had beautiful salt and pepper hair, but anyhow, we went ahead and filmed it again. Bill didn't mention the fact that, I think he mentioned it, when Eisenhower's plane landed, it's a huge plane. You couldn't, it sits 10 feet off of the tarmac. You'd have to have a ladder to get in and out of it. And the plane usually was down at the end of the runway and taxis back around to the A part of the, there's an A section of the runway where the tower is. And then it comes to the VIP area where they were going to have the parade, which, by the way, was canceled, Bill mentioned. Well, Eisenhower's plane sat out on the runway as far as it could be. They closed the runway the whole day while the president was there, and Bill said he remembers seeing it about 4:45 or 5 in the afternoon, seeing the president's plane fly over Holloman Air Force Base. So we're ready now for a man who flew into Holloman Air Force Base the day before Eisenhower arrived. We believe it was the 10th, around the 10th of February, 1955. Was due to go out the next morning, and they would not let him go, and they held up his plane for a whole day. He was a staff sergeant who was a loader on a cargo plane. This man saw Ike's plane land and heard President Eisenhower speak at Holloman, February 10th, 1955. Okay, ready for the airman, please. Sergeant Wyckoff. We've had to use pseudonyms for our
the Air
people.
Force
There we
in
go.
1950. Well, this was actually 1951. I was in an airplane accident, and I had another airplane accident where I split my head open, and it ruined my back. My wife had just lost her first child,
He was
and
a
the
tail gunner in
chaplain
in
and
World War
base
II.
commander
43
said,
missions over Japan.
You know, you're due to go to Korea, but in your condition, if you volunteer for Bacalar Air Force Base out in Indiana, any other, that's where you go. So we were fortunate. We went there and stayed there. And my wife was pregnant with our actually the second child. And I says, I can't send you overseas. Let's just stay in the next year, and then we'll get out. So that's what we did. While I was out in Indiana, my job was loading and delivering cargo. We went to Washington, where they opened the new base with cargo, and just kind of anything they wanted, we would fly it.
What other bases did you go to?
Well, I went to March and Holman 2 or 3 times. We hauled what we think is stuff for the atomic bomb.
Dave, what do you recall about Holloman?
Well, we had to haul a load of stuff down there, parts that they needed, and the runway is like this. And I never seen anything like that before. And anyway, as we were there, we saw Air Force One come in. And we didn't know who it was. And then an officer come around and says, you can't leave. And I says, well, the pilot said, we have to leave. And he says, well, President Eisenhower's here, and you can't leave the field until he's gone. And I says, you can hear him over the loudspeakers, but it didn't do any good, you know. I would have liked to have seen him. And this officer, we didn't have the clearance to go into the mess hall. And one of the other officers, a higher ranking officer, came to us and says, would you like to go in and eat and listen to a speech? And most of us said, yeah, because I'd like to see him. I didn't get to shake his hand or anything, but because I didn't have the right badge clearance to go in, but they did leave us go in at the very end, and we ate and listened to his speech.
What did you think of him?
I thought he was great. He had a lot of good ideas. Maybe he had some I disagreed with, but I don't agree with everybody anyway, you know.
Dave, do you remember what date that was that you were there?
The reason I know when he was there is here's what I got discharged. He was there in mid-February of 1955. That was my last trip that I made while I was in the service. Then I was discharged, and I came back home to the Bay Area with my family.
I've kind of heard what we did, what we didn't do, and this is all hearsay, except for what these